In turn, the Turkish Prime Minister rebuked the Israeli President Shimon Peres in finance summit in Davos, and we all know that the rebuke went even further than what was intended. The Turkish Prime Minister said angrily that the Israelis knew how to kill children. And this was on live broadcast in almost all the countries of the world. Israelis were angry. A month later, the Deputy Israeli Foreign Minister, Dani Ayalon, called the Turkish ambassador to Israel to his office in Knesset, this is the Israeli parliament, and stupidly, they arranged a kind of play with the Turkish ambassador. They arranged a low sofa for the Turkish ambassador and arranged for themselves bar chairs on which, you know, it's not easy to sit. You should see the pictures. Dani Ayalon and another Israeli bureaucrat is sitting on the chairs, high chairs, and the Turkish ambassador is sitting on a low chair. And in between there was a small table on which there was only the flag of the State of Israel and not a flag of Turkey. This was not enough. The Israeli journalists didn't realize that this was actually a gameplay to teach the Turks their lesson. So they said to the deputy foreign minister, why don't you shake hands with the Turkish ambassador so as to give gestures to both sides? And he spoke in Hebrew, which the ambassador didn't understand. He was smiling all the time. He spoke in Hebrew and said, don't you understand, friends? This is a gameplay. Don't you see where he is sitting so as he should know their place? Don't you see there is only Israeli map, Israeli flag on the table? And of course it was on the Israeli newspapers the next day. Ankara realized that the Turkish ambassador, and in his personality, the Turkish nation was really defamed. I always say, well, the list of events continues with several other events. You know, every time the Turkish Prime Minister rebuked the Israeli side, of course, and the Israelis responded in a similar voice. But from time to time, there have been symbolic games like this. One another was the Blue Marmara flotilla, which was not organized by Turkey at all, or by a Turkish civil society organization at all. It was a British, Irish, Greek project. Turkey joined later on by IHH organization. But since Turks are Muslims, and as I said earlier, the Turkish people are take care of only the Palestinian issue as an international policy issue. There were more Turks willing to join to the flotilla than any other nation. There were people from 42 different nations in the flotilla, from 32 nations on the particular ship called Mavi Marmara, Blue Marmara, on the 9th of 31st of May 2010. The Israeli side, we don't know whether they promised to the Turkish side that they won't intervene, or they will intervene at this or that stage, but it came as a shock to several experts, including myself, that the Israeli Navy intervened in international waters to the Mavi Marmara, which was not a Turkish ship, by the way. It was officially a ship that belonged to Comor Islands. Do you know where it is? It's in Africa, between Madagascar and the main African continent. But it carried Turkish flags, and it carried Turkish citizens, American citizens also. And 9 Turkish citizens, one also an American citizen, were killed during the operation. Inescapably, Turkey asked for apology and investigation, international investigation, and several other things from the side of Israel. In fact, there were seven demands from the side of Israel. 5 of them were met within 1 week. 2 of them are still waiting for the Israeli government to accept. The Blue Marmara issue is a historical turning point between Turkish-Israeli relations, but I have to say Turks are ready to forget their deaths. We are dying, all of us are dying, but we are not sitting on low chairs. The low chair treatment will never be forgotten. 9 people are killed. Islamically speaking, many people, their relatives at least, believe that they are martyrs, because they went to paradise, no problem. We have every year more than 200 Turkish people killed by the hands of the terrorist organization PKK. It's not the end of life for the country, but Lord Chair treatment will never be forgotten. The relations between Turkey and Israel was not downgraded the day after the flotilla event. In fact, the Turkish side and the Israeli side made it clear that both sides didn't want this particular event to leave a mark on the relations of the two countries, and both sides did want to solve this peacefully in negotiations. The negotiations continued about 6 months. They didn't give a result. For 4 times, the Israeli side came to the point of accepting a kind of apology that wouldn't mean an apology in Hebrew. This is diplomacy. So they will use, speaking in Hebrew, they would say, we did not sell, which means we do apologize, but they would say something that means we regret, or that means we are sorry. And in fact, in one of these occasions, they came to the point of saying, we do apologize for the mismanagement of the operation, but not the operation. Then anyhow, the Turkish side accepted this last way of apologizing, but not apologizing really. This was accepted, but then the Israeli Foreign Minister, Avigdor Lieberman, intervened and he prevented this becoming a reality. The Palmer report, when it was leaked to the New York Times, and its content was disturbed in the New York Times article claiming that the Palmer's report saw Turkish side wrongdoing and the Israeli side having done nothing wrong. In fact, the report itself was saying that it would be best for Israel to compensate the families of the victims and to apologize to Turkey in the manner Turkey asks for. The report said this. The report also criticized the Turkish side for not doing everything to prevent a clash between the activists and the Israeli Navy. It also criticized the particular Turkish civil society organization, IHH, for its non-clear intents in joining this flotilla and so on. But it also criticized the Israeli side. But the New York Times article came as a blow to the negotiations. Turkey had earlier made it very clear that if the content of the Palmer report was leaked to the press by the Israeli side, that would be an end of Turkish-Israeli diplomatic relations. This is in record, and it happened so. When the report was published in New York Times, the Turkish side declared the Turkish-Israeli relations being downgraded to the level of second secretary. Bad news for Turkey and for Israel, good news for the second secretary of Israel in Ankara, because he is acting ambassador. And he is a Druze, by the way. He is a Druze citizen of the state of Israel. I know a particular person who claims he had been an ambassador to Ankara, and he made a lot of fame with this name, Dr. Alan Liel, who never became an ambassador, in fact. He was the acting ambassador because he was the second secretary in Ankara when, once again, in year 1982, when Israel decided to invade the eastern Jerusalem and make eastern Jerusalem and western Jerusalem the combined united capital city of the state of Israel, Turkey, together with the United States and other wall countries, moved their embassies from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, declared that Jerusalem was no longer the capital city of the state of Israel, but Tel Aviv was, and they downgraded the diplomatic level in Tel Aviv to the second secretary and in Ankara to the second secretary. Alan Liel was a young man. At that time, he was the second secretary in Ankara, but he is now known as the ambassador of Israel to Turkey for 5 years, because he stayed as the acting ambassador in Ankara until 1987, when Turkey decided to upgrade the relations once again to the ambassadorial level. One extra move came from Turkey during the United Nations vote, at least move, let me say, for Palestinian independence. What Palestine is asking this time from the United Nations to be recognized was not just recognition of the state of Palestine, it was a qualified recognition, meaning just like Israel asks for qualified recognition, Israel does not ask world countries to recognize it as an independent country, it asks world countries to recognize it as an independent Jewish country. Just like that, Palestinian state wanted to be recognized within its 1976 borders. This is qualified recognition. Not 67 borders, meaning correct 67 war borders. This of course means lots of Israeli settlements within the West Bank being in occupied lands of Palestinians recognized by the world family of nations. We don't know what will happen. The process is still continuing on. The process is at the stage of being discussed in the UN Security Council, and it seems that Bosnia and Herzegovina is the key factor to decide whether to continue with the move or not. Interesting, they're a Muslim country. But in anyhow, Turkey declared emergency in their embassies all over the world to campaign for support of the Palestinian state. This was the last move, and from then on, the relations are still at the level of second secretary. Interestingly, the Israeli Consul General in Istanbul is at a much higher level diplomatically than a second secretary, but since he is not in the embassy building, he stays in Istanbul. And the Turkish ambassador to Jerusalem, which is actually an ambassador to the state of Palestine, but is also accredited in the eyes of Israel as a consul general, is also staying in Jerusalem. So in that sense, the highest level of representation in Turkey is in Istanbul, by a man who used to be an ambassador previously, who is now the Consul General of Israel, and by another man who used to be an ambassador previously, and he is a Consul General for Turkey in Jerusalem. Now I will say a few words about how I myself perceive the situation. This is what the two countries did, and I myself think that first of all, the Turkish-Israeli relations are valuable relations, not for Turkey, not for Israel, but for the Palestinians, but for the Syrians, but for the Iraqis, but for the Egyptians, but for all the Arab nations who eventually will have to find a moderator between them and the state of Israel in order to solve their problems. I will tell you a short story. Actually, I myself witnessed in 1998 September, and the story will give you enough evidence of the importance of Turkey's relations with Israel. In 1998, one of our Zaman Media Group's publication, Action News Weekly, published the full content of the 1993 strategic alliance between Turkey and Israel. And it made a lot of discussion in Turkey. And the opposition party, Anavatan Partisi, at that time, and its leader, Mesut Yilmaz, was quite antagonistic to the idea of a strategic alliance between Turkey and Israel if it included an article against the third party in the region. So while he was running for prime ministry in the general elections, he promised that if he becomes the prime minister, he will check the agreement, and if the agreement had an article against the third party, at that time this meant Iran, then it would be cancelled. A month later, he became the prime minister. And a month later, he visited the state of Israel and the state of Palestine. In Jerusalem, there was no problem. In Ramallah, when he was being hosted by the late president of the state of Israel, of Palestine, Yasser Arafat, he was asked by a Turkish journalist, it was not me, what he did with the alliance agreement. Of course, he felt himself in a rather miserable condition because he was standing next to Yasser Arafat and he was asked about his promise on the Turkish-Israeli alliance agreement to cancel it. And he couldn't say anything. He said, you know, I'm just the new prime minister, I didn't have time to look at it and so on. But Yasser Arafat came to rescue. He said, I want to answer this question. He said, we are quite happy with the good Turkish-Israeli relations, and we want those relations to be even better. Because, he said, eventually we will have an independent Palestine side by side with the state of Israel. But these two states are almost intermingled with each other. There won't be ever a real independence of the state of Israel or a real independence of state of Palestine, because they are interdependent to each other. The Palestinians do not have their currency, they use Israeli currency, they had their water, but the water cleaning stations are Israeli, distribution system is Israeli made, they don't have their energy, they are buying their electricity from Israel, the gas is going to Israel first and then coming to Gaza and to the West Bank. Palestine does not have a seaport, Palestine does not have an airport. In that condition, that interdependence will continue forever, and the problems will pop up from time to time. This is what Yasser Arafat was saying. We will need a country that will, he used the term good office. This is a diplomatic term, it's a moderator that both sides can trust. He said, we need a good office that whenever there pops up a problem, we can run. We can go to Egypt as Palestinians. We do trust Egypt, but the Israelis do not, he said. Israelis prefer United States of America, but we do not, he said. The only country that both sides wholeheartedly respect and trust is Turkey, he said. So we are supportive of the continuation of the Turkish-Israeli relations, as told at that day. I wholeheartedly still believe the strategic importance of Turkish-Israeli relations. Yes, they are good for the Turkish economy. Yes, they are good for the Israeli economy. Yes, there are common interests, common strategic interests, common enemies, similarities that we are all Mediterranean people and so on. Yes, there is more than 500 years of common history and so on, but there is one strategic issue. These relations are important for the third sides. They are important for Syrians. If, for example, in the end of 2009, there was an operation as lead on Gaza, we would probably see today a Turkish-Syrian-Israeli friendship alliance agreement. And we wouldn't probably see Syrian people uprising against the regime, because the regime would have already become a participant of the regime by now. I frankly hope that either the Israeli side or the Turkish side will find a way to come out of the current standstill in the relations. It's not easy, but the history of our relations have seen this low level twice in our history, and they have seen the strategic alliance level twice once again. Why not to see once again the strategic alliance within 5 to 10 years? Of course, it will take some time. And I won't take more time of you. I'm open to your questions.